When it comes to crucial new model launches, the Tonale is a big one for Alfa Romeo. And we're here in Italy to drive the plug-in hybrid Q4, which arrives in Australia later next year. It is Alfa Romeo's first small SUV and its first new model in 6 years. It's the first electrified hybrid for Alfa Romeo, and it's a key stepping stone for its plans to become fully electric by 2027. So, no pressure then. But is the Tonale plug-in hybrid Q4 any good? And is it still authentically Alfa Romeo given the change that it brings to a brand that's been around for 112 years? Well, let's find out. Tonale, much like its big brother Stelvio, is named after an alpine pass in northern Italy. But regardless of how chic the name is, the success of Tonale really hinges on how it looks, how it feels, and ultimately how it goes. Oh, and then there's price. But first let's start with styling. The Scudetto Shield grille, Brera-style LED matrix headlights and classic telephone dial wheel designs certainly make the right Italian noises. And the tail end too is stylish and charming. But where Tonale has a tough fight and just gets away with it is applying captivating Italian style to a fairly dumpy SUV shape. It's a little over 4.5 metres long and 1.6 metres tall, with a wheelbase that's a little bit more than 2.6 metres. Hardly captivating proportions, though the Tonale is sized right against the likes of Audi Q3, Mercedes-Benz GLA and Volvo XC40, three SUVs it hopes to compete with. But the actual feel of the Tonale has a lot to do with interior execution, so that's where we're going to head next. And while its exterior styling is reminiscent of Alfa Romeo classicisms, the cabin space fully embraces the marque's vibe and aesthetic forged by the likes of Giulia and Stelvio. The cabin format is almost retro. The oh-so-familiar style of the wheel, the surface contours and much of the controls and switches that could have been lifted from any Alfa Romeo from the past decade or so really work to good effect. When it comes to digital eye candy, it's a little slicker and better integrated than some Italian stablemates. The 12.3-inch TFT driver screen is sharp and modern despite some of the graphics' retro looks. While its neat floating 10.25-inch multimedia screen is fulsome with content and easily accessible. It is an Android operating system with 4G over-the-air updates and uses Amazon Alexa voice control. Wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, DAB+, and proprietary sat-nav are all par for the Tonale course. The Tonale plug-in hybrid launches globally in TI, high-spec Veloce and Veloce base Speciale forms, the latter essentially an appearance package added to the former. But whichever way you go, material choice and execution is a bit of an improvement upon where Alfa Romeo has been in years past. As the flagship of the model lineup, the plug-in hybrid gets dual-zone climate control, ambient lighting, partial Alcantara trim and inductive phone charging. Ticking more option boxes in Europe adds leather trim, electric seat adjustment, seat ventilation, a 360-degree camera system and a 14-speaker Harman Kardon sound system. Alfa Romeo is playing a straight bat and that's really suited for 4 adults, and as a small SUV it's pretty roomy in here, although it's not necessarily class leading. Rear room is decent but not outstanding, and the rear seats don't have tilt or slide adjustment. But you do get rear air vents, USB A and C ports, and it's quite nicely appointed in here. Boot space is a decent 385 litres, which can expand to 1430 litres with a 60-40 rear split seats folded flat. Next up, the drive experience. When the Tonale nameplate debuts in Australia next year, it will be powered by a 1.5 litre turbo petrol engine with series and parallel electric assistance, good for 118 kilowatts and 240 newton metres. But the plug-in hybrid Q4 is the range topper, and it will arrive later in 2023 for those who want a warmer Tonale experience. The tree topper fits a smaller 1.3 litre multi-air turbo petrol engine, good for 132 kilowatts and 270 newton metres. There is actually a 33 kilowatt e-motor up front under the bonnet as well, although that is there to work as an inverter for the battery and to reduce turbo lag. And the power unit up front just powers the front wheels via a 6-speed automatic transmission. Q4 does mean all-wheel drive, and it's all-wheel drive on demand, so the rear axle gets an electric motor that outputs 90 kilowatts and 250 newton meters. Drive can be split, so either axle can drive the car either independently or together. The plug-in hybrid has total system power of 205 kilowatts plus a host of other enticing stats. 0 to 100 acceleration is claimed at 6.2, but the more impressive figure is the claimed fuel consumption. Alfa Romeo quotes fuel consumption as low as 1.14 litres per 100 WLTP. However, here at the launch in real-world testing over about a 100-kilometre range, our test car returned a figure that was more like 4.2 litres per 100. That's because of its 600 kilometres of maximum range, there's 80 kilometres of pure urban cycle electric range, offered from its 15.5 kilowatt hour lithium-ion battery pack. It'll also happily run on full electric mode up to 135 kilometres an hour. A full plug-in recharge takes 2.5 hours using the Tonale's onboard 7.4 kilowatt charger. On 3 kilowatt household charging, recharge times are more like 5.5 hours. And all up, that's a rosy collection of stats indeed. But for all its newfound electrified tech, the Tonale does sit on a derivative of the aging SCC S platform first rolled out on Fiat Punto back in 2005. That means that the small SUV really is the last hurrah for old school architecture before Alfa Romeo switches to new platforms for its fast approaching electric future. Still, both the Veloce and Speciale fit Brembo brakes and electronic LSD, and Alfa Romeo's DNA drive mode trickery. The Veloce, for its part, fits dual mode suspension damping, while the system can be optioned to the passively damped Speciale. Right, but how does it go on the road? Unsurprisingly, there's a host of different EV features or modes, such as full electric with sailing mode for flat running, an energy recouping e-coasting descent control mode, and an e-save petrol mode that maintains battery charge until you need it around town. Put the boot in and the hybrid drive is pretty lusty, though that's probably not the highlight of the driving experience. Where the hybrid Tonale is a real gem is just how smooth the interaction is between internal combustion and electric drive. The 1.3 does have pretty good character, though when you do back off it is quite quiet, and sometimes it's difficult to discern where the electric power zips in and out of the drive. Ride is pretty decent, and overall it's quite a refined machine, though the one thing where it's really quite lacking is that it doesn't really have that passionate Alfa Romeo character. The steering, for my money, is a little aloof and a bit too light, and while you can fiddle around with the DNA drive mode selector to up the enthusiasm to dynamic mode, it really doesn't provide the kind of spirit that you really expect from an Alfa Romeo. Handling is competent rather than frisky, and it does have a torque vectoring system that utilises all four wheels, though really dynamically it's not the friskiest vehicle out there. It does have a lot of the driving hallmarks that small SUV buyers and those who like premium vehicles want, although it doesn't really have the kind of fire that's really going to kindle the interest of a hardcore Alfisti. Does the Tonale plug-in hybrid suffer because of its aging architecture? Well, no, not really in practice. It is quite polished and refined, and it does feel like quite a good evolution. In a nutshell, the Tonale plug-in is very nice and polite, but perhaps a little too polite for what you'd expect on a spirited Alfa Romeo. If anything, it's low CO2, its 80-kilometre EV range and 600-kilometre electric and petrol range is perfectly fit for European consumption right now. Against the likes of Giulia or even the Stelvio SUV, the Tonale is probably the mildest Alfa Romeo experience money will be able to buy next year. But the plug-in hybrid Q4 is different. It's quicker, fancier and more frugal. Does the Tonale plug-in bring a new level of passion and driver engagement to the small SUV segment? Well, that is a little bit of a stretch. But its execution is polished, and it does offer an awful lot of Italian flair to those after a small SUV experience. It does work particularly well here in Europe, where its low emissions allow it to be used really in any European city. That is backed by some pretty impressive urban EV range, and a total range of 600 kilometres for electric and petrol running makes for very good grand touring. However, we do look forward to seeing how it's going to go in Aussie conditions when it arrives back home next year. Well, that's what I think, but how about you? Put your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, and as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.